After some questions popping up about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease calculations in the forums, I thought it'd be interesting to try to use a protocol to do the calculations. The calculation here is from a couple of different web pages. I'm making no guarantees that the formula is actually correct, but this is what I want to make use of. I've got to be honest, I don't actually understand what some of the terms mean. First thing I need to do is get the calculation to look more useful from the point of view of trying to get my head around it to use within the protocol. So what I've done, wherever there's a multiplication, I've separated those from the other bits, and I'll use those as key parts of what I'm doing in the protocol. In order to work with the data, as far as possible, I'm going to use read-coded entries, numeric entries that are in the patient record. So for BMI, for instance, I'm going to use this very straightforward read code over here. For whether or not they've got diabetes, which is what I assume this is about, I'm going to put a question in. But if I knew which read codes to look for, I could actually dig that out from patient record as well. The ST/ALT ratio, I'm assuming, is this read code divided by that read code. Platelets, I'm assuming, is that read code, and albumin, I'm assuming, is that read code. Obviously these could all be wrong, so if you want to make use of the approach I'm going to show you now, entirely up to you, but please do make sure yourself that you're happy with the calculation that you're going to use and you're happy with the actual read codes. Having started to think about how I'm going to approach this, the first thing that comes to mind is, where am I going to get this data from? I can't assume it's going to be in the patient record, so therefore I've got to allow for the user to actually provide the information. So I've designed a fairly straightforward template. There's plenty of space on here for useful instructions and notes to help people to fill it in. And one of the things which I think may be useful is when they look at the template, if the previous values are all displayed, that might be handy. So when I'm using this, these will be filled in already if there's information from the past. You might decide you don't want it to look like that. You might decide that you just want them to see the values over here, which means they have to work their way through each of the fields to see what's over there. What I've also decided, I'm going to add a button on here to run the protocol. The thing to remember is its launch protocol, specific protocol. That's it. So off to the protocol now. I'm not going to have it trigger automatically because I'm going to use a button off the template to trigger it. Filters, if appropriate, minimum, maximum age, so on. Because I want to be doing some calculations, it makes sense for me if I put the variables in first. The main tools we're going to use are declare variable. We can give this a name. And we can give it a starting value. In this case, if we look at what the calculation has in it, and the other main one is change variable, which allows us to take a variable and do things to it, such as adding values, putting together, or picking up a reading. Let's go through it step by step, maybe multiplying by another variable, and so on. this is our first variable. I've called it an NAFLD score, and I gave it a starting value of minus 1.675, which fits in with the formula that we've got. I've then added one for age, so I just called it age calc, left it with a starting value of 0, that will get picked up. Next one is age, called it age calc, got a starting value of 0, the correct value will go in from the patient record later. Then got BMI, the AST-ALT ratio, calculation for platelets, calculation for albumin, and it's here where we start doing things with those actual variables. So here I've taken the age from the patient record, multiplying it by a value of 0.037. Press OK. Then similar with the BMI calculation. With this one though, we've taken a reading, and this is the standard numeric readings dialog. So I've taken the BMI, multiplied that by 0.094. This AST-ALT ratio is 0.99 times the AST serum level. That was picked up in the same way as the BMI. And that new value for the ratio is then divided by the serum alanine aminotransferase level. We then take the platelets count and multiply that, and then the albumin, multiply that, and then from this point what we're going to do is manipulate the score itself. So the first thing is I want to take the score and add to it the age calc. I then take that score, which is now a little bit different, and add to it the BMI calc. And then here I've got a question. So to put the question in, you then type in questions, add new answers, amend existing answers, change the order, delete them, and so on. So this is what I actually put in. Does the patient have diabetes? If I hover on it, it tells me that was a question. If I double click on it, I can show you that I've formatted that a little bit. I've got yes and no as the answers. If the answer is yes, then we take that score that we're manipulating and we add 1.13, because that's what it tells us in the formula. The formula also says if the answer is no, to add 0. Well, if I'm adding 0, that's just the same as doing nothing. So what we've got is the yes is add 1.13 and then move on to the next option. The no is just go straight on to that next option. And here we're looking at the score again, and we're adding the AST-ALT ratio. We take the score and we deduct the platelets calculation. We also deduct the albumin. Then we have an information box. And I've copied and pasted this from the website. This bit here, this is how I can show in an information box what the actual score is to the person that's using the protocol. So when we run this, it will say the score is, and whatever the score is will be here instead of the variable. I have tweaked these a little bit to make sure that the greater thans and less thans and equals all make sense. And as it stands, that's the end of the protocol. Now, there are other things that we could be doing, and one of them is putting some text into the patient record about what the protocol's just done. If we had a read-coded value for our score, we could use save variable, so that would be our score, and then we could find a particular value. I'm just going to pick this first one off the top of the lid just to show how it's done, and that would then put the score as a numeric read code into the patient record based upon what we've just chosen. Unfortunately, at the moment there is no available read code, so that's not going to work. What I can do instead is I can add a note to the patient record. And this allows me to just have any old text I want drop into the patient record. So I want to make this a little bit cleverer then. I want to make it so that when we get to our score at the end, some text based upon that score goes into the patient record. Remember, we've got those 3 different bands, and I can at least indicate which band we're looking at in the patient record, even if I can't get a precise value in. Unfortunately, that score will not go in as text. It will only go in as a read-coded value, if there's a read code to go with it. The tool that will let me determine what text goes into the record based upon a variable is test variable. So we'll say it's the score, and if the score is equal to, less than, and so on, have it between values. Unfortunately, what it won't let me do is start off with less than minus. I'm pressing the minus key and nothing's happening. So as the first of our bands is with a minus, then just go with the score as it stands isn't going to work. I've got a way around that though. What I'm doing is I'm setting up an additional variable to use to adjust the scores at the end so I can get the results I'm after. I'm going to leave it as 0, and I'll sort that out later on. So it needs to fit in here or anywhere else within the protocol. I just like all my declares to be at the beginning, but I could have put that in toward the end where it needs to be used rather than messing around at the beginning if that was the way I wanted to work. So let's see what I can do with that. I've worked out that I need to allow for 1.455. So my adjustment is the score plus 1.455. What that means then is when I test the adjustment, if it's less than 0, that's the same as the score being less than minus 1.455. Greater than or equal to 0 is 1.455 upwards. So if the first test is true, then in my information box I've got that's the score and that's the band it falls in. I'm assuming that the low score here is good, so I've coloured that green. Of course if I'm wrong, you put your own colour there. But that's our first test. Because there are 3 conditions to look at, one test isn't enough, I need a second test in. So if it doesn't fall in here, we do another test, and what we're looking at is if the value is between 0.01, because that's more than 0, up to 2.13. which is the equivalent of the 2 bands we've got remaining. If it falls within this band, here's our information. So if it doesn't fall within this band, that means it wasn't here, and it's not here, so therefore it's in this range, and that's what I put in for that one. Don't forget, this needs to be saved and it needs to be published to be usable. And these examples at the end of the protocol all use information boxes, which only displays the information to the user. If I did want it saved into the patient record, I would need it to be add note. When I tested the protocol with the template, there was something I'd forgotten that caused a problem. Having the protocol button on the template didn't turn out to be a good idea. The values that you enter on the template don't go into the patient record until you press OK. Pressing the protocol button instead meant the protocol would either pick up the old values if there were any, or fall over because it was missing values. So I'm going to change things round. I've taken the button off the template and I'm going to fit the template into the protocol. We do that with action. I want to put it up here so it's before where we start doing things with the actual values in the record. That's the template that I'm after. We'll pause the protocol while that's on screen. I'm going to slip it in here, like so. Let's try and test it again. Okay, let's start up the protocol. That's the only one with a previous value in it, so I have to fill all the others in. I have no idea if those are good or bad values. That would sort of suggest that I've not made very good guesses. But let's press OK at the bottom and see what happens now. On the right hand side of the screen I can see the panel with the protocol in it. Got as far as the question, does the patient have diabetes, yes or no? Incidentally, it is possible to have this without a pause button on it. This was the first way of showing the information. That's the score from the variable and the 3 bands it could fall into. This is where we went and did a little bit more, and it's actually picked up which band the score falls into. And that's it.